State have witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can call your first witness.
Sergeant Jimmy Wall.
Okay. Sergeant, you can come forward, please, and be sworn.
Just to make before Mr. Wall gives his testimony, Officer Krieger, I believe, may also be called to testify. We actually know the role as her for his testimony.
Okay. Officer, if you just step outside,
Okay.
and we'll call you back in when it's your turn to testify.
Do you promise to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Have a seat on the witness stand over here, please, sir. Mr. Hernandez, you go ahead and proceed.
State your name for the record.
My name is Jimmy Wall
And where are you employed?
with Jacksonville Aviation Authority Police Department.
And how long have you been employed with them?
19 and a half years.
And were you present on the day the video that was shown just now in court? Were you present that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what happened when you arrived with the defendant here? I know that we saw in the video what happened. I just want a very quick account from you. What happened when you arrived?
Can I back up to as I was approaching, where I observed the vehicle sitting?
Yes.
I saw where the vehicles were sitting, and as I approached, I got out, I looked at my surroundings, and then approached the officers and the defendant, and acknowledged him, provided him some paperwork, and again, like you said, the video speaks for itself.
And what paperwork was it that you provided?
It was an application that the Aviation Authority requires for people or companies that want to come up and solicit, demonstrate, or make any types of statements. They have an application process that they fill out, and it's provided to the Aviation Authority, and they get approval or they don't get approval.
Your Honor, if I may, I have a copy. I'd like to verify with him that this in fact was what he gave to the defendant.
Mr. Frank, you see?
Yes, I think I know what it is.
I didn't find anything in the copy that he gave me. It's an appendix.
Yes, that's it.
Sergeant Wall, would you please describe the procedure if somebody wishes to submit an application like the one you made at the defendant?
Well, again, the procedure is to fill the paperwork out, return it to the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. It goes through the process there, and then they notify the individual applying if they can do what they're requesting to do or not. And there's also locations provided for them to do that at the airport.
And somebody would use this application for what purpose? Describe what this application is for and what it requires.
To give them access to the airport to whether they're demonstrating, soliciting, or again, trying to make their cause known. It allows them permission or denial to do so. And if it is permitted, the Aviation Authority has designated areas at the airport for this purpose.
And to your knowledge, is there anything through the application process that would restrict or deny an application based on politics, religion, anything that you're aware of?
No.
And the day say that, the video that we watched that's in question, when you approached the defendant, the property that you were on was JAA property?
Yes, it was.
He was inside of the gate at the airport, correct?
He was inside of the property lines of the airport, yes.
You know, this time the state would seek to admit the application, into evidence. I believe without objection, the state's exhibit 1.
Mr. Brown, you know, Judge, okay, be admitted as state's exhibit number 1. Just for the record, while we'll stop for a minute, is there an agreement that the video is going to be admitted into evidence?
There's no objection from the state, Your Honor.
Good, go ahead, ask me the next.
Would that be your exhibit?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it'll be admitted as defendant's number 1 into evidence when we get done.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sergeant Wall, when you approached the defendant on the day in question, did you have any observations of him holding or carrying anything?
Yes, ma'am. He had some signs he had in his possession.
And when you approached, were the signs up, down?
It's difficult for me to recall exactly because the other officers had already been on the scene for a few minutes before I got there and had been talking with him. I do remember, as the video showed, that I handed him the application and he did accept it.
Now, at any time during your interaction with the defendant, did he ever state his purpose on the property?
No, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any cross-examination, Mr. Brown?
Yes, Your Honor. Sergeant Wall, you said you didn't state its purpose. Do you require to state the purpose when traveling down the road to a police officer just because they're asked?
Yes, sir.
You handed Mr. Hoffman an application that's been submitted into evidence. Who approves those applications and denies those applications?
The airport administration.
So the airport administrator will be the person?
Administrator, it's above my pay grade. It's administrator, the director.
So you have no involvement in that?
No, sir.
So you don't know what permits are approved or denied?
No, sir.
You don't know whether they denied every permit that's ever been offered for a person to protest politically?
Don't know.
You ever seen protesters on the property before?
Yes, sir.
Where at?
Departing flights area. Upper level curb.
Up by the terminal.
Mhm.
And there's a receipt area there.
There's a designated area that the airport provides.
Are you aware of the reasons that the aviation authority lists why it might deny a person's permit with their?
No, sir.
So you have no knowledge of what guidelines or rules the authority might use in denying a permit?
No, sir.
So you wouldn't know, for example, that they reserve the right to deny a permit because a person does not have an adequate amount of insurance?
No, sir.
And they don't even define what an adequate amount of insurance is. You don't know anything about that, do you?
Not outside the gates.
Just so we're clear, you may use the phrase, or the state used the phrase, he was inside the gate, JAA. Let's make sure we're clear on exactly where he was. Was he in a secure area of the airport?
No, he wasn't.
You saw the video, right? You saw traffic moving by you, beside him. Was that traffic just general public traffic coming into the airport?
Yes, sir.
Is there any sign that says no traffic on this road unless you're stopping at the airport?
No, sir.
So that is an open, publicly traveled highway, isn't it?
Yes,
Or
sir.
roadway. Officer, do you ever enforce the traffic code?
Sir?
Do you ever enforce the traffic code?
We enforce traffic laws, yes, sir.
Okay. So you're familiar with chapter 316?
Yes, sir.
Does JAA have any special traffic rules just for JAA?
No, sir.
Do you know that the state preempts and doesn't allow individual agencies to set up their own rules? Were you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with the law regarding pedestrians walking the side roads where there are no sidewalks.
Couldn't quote it to you, but I'm somewhat familiar with it.
It is legal in the state of Florida to walk alongside the publicly traveled road, generally publicly open road, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So Mr. Hoffman, while walking down the side of the road, just walking down the side of the road didn't commit a crime, did he?
Not walking.
Didn't constitute any basis for you to issue a trespass warning, did it?
Yes, sir.
Him walking down the side of that road constituted a basis for a trespass.
Yes, sir. The video you provided clearly shows that he stopped and was stationary prior to the officer's arrival
So it's
for a
your,
period of time.
so it's your contention that if a person stops and stands in one place for more than how long, officer?
Now, I don't have a time.
Can a person stop for 1 minute?
I don't have a time.
Can a person, okay. So just in your arbitrary discretion, when you decide a person's been standing there too long, you can issue them a trespass warning.
Based on prior knowledge and past experience, yes, sir.
And is that especially true if they're holding a sign that you don't appreciate?
It doesn't matter what kind of sign it is.
You encountered Mr. Hoffman once before, hadn't you?
Twice.
On those other locations, did you tell him that the side of the roadway there was public property on those other two occasions?
No, sir. I told him it was private property.
So you always told him it was private property?
Sir?
You always told him on each occasion it was private property?
Yes, sir.
Didn't you just hear after this one in the video, I heard you say, I didn't tell you last time it was private property, but this time I'm telling you it was private property?
I didn't tell him last time he was trespassing. I told him it was private property, and it's on the video.
You're on airport property. You are on a public right-of-way. Everybody has a right to drive in here.
I appreciate you saying that,
Right.
acknowledging
But
that.
when you're standing next to the road, whether you're 10 foot, like right now, we're a distraction to all the people coming in right now with us standing here talking with you.
Yeah.
And with you being here holding signs, that's a distraction also. It's no.
Is JAA a public entity, officer?
Your Honor, I would object to legal conclusions. This is kind of the crux of a legal argument, asking the witness's opinion. His subjective opinion, to be honest, is irrelevant as to whether or not it's private or public. That's what we're here to argue for the court.
I tend to agree with the
I'll refer this question on.
Objection sustained.
Officer, were you aware that the state attorney's office has conceded in one of their filings that it is in fact?
Objection. It's argumentative and irrelevant for this witness.
Sustained.
I'll move on, Your Honor. On what basis did you inform Mr. Hoffman that this was private property?
On what basis?
Yes, sir.
Verbally?
Who told you this was private property?
The aviation authority has told me it was private property.
Who was the aviation authority?
I've been here 19 and a half years. I've heard it multiple times. I can't recall everybody that's told me.
Were there any other designated areas for somebody protest, for lack of a better word, other than the area about the terminal you've already described?
Not that I'm aware of. You would need to check with the aviation authority for that.
So just so clear, the area where Mr. Hoffman was located, it was up, how far from the overpass that begins the JAA property did you say he was?
How far from the overpass? I would say 300, 400 feet, 200 feet.
That's not a restricted area in any way.
Not as long as you're moving to the airport for business purposes.
Do you ever stop people at random as they're driving in to ask them if they're going to the airport for legitimate business purposes?
No, sir.
So why did you stop Mr. Hoffman?
Because he was stopped. He was standing on the side of the road within 5 feet.
Well, officer, I'm pretty sure I didn't see you pull up until after your other officers had already stopped him and kept him there. Isn't that right?
Correct.
So you don't know how long he was stopped before your officers arrived, do you?
No, sir, you just showed it to me on the video.
You mean the video where the camera was bouncing as he was walking backwards?
No, so the video where he was stopped stationary and the blue trombone and the heel was stationary for several minutes in your video.
Several minutes.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, have you played the video?
Sure.
All right,
Okay, let's stop, sorry, we just can't see this for some reason.
My TV's off.
At the screen.
Got it.
Now, officer, I think I know what portion you're talking about. So I'm gonna get to there and see if it's the part that you're trying to describe. Is this the part you're describing, officer?
No, sir.
Not this part.
No, sir.
Farther down?
Further down.
Is this about where you're describing, officer?
Approximately.
Okay, let's go back. You tell me when you think Mr. Hoffman is no longer moving in a direction.
Right about now.
Okay? I stopped that at 15 minutes and 22 seconds. Does that look correct to you on the timer? Timer on the lower left-hand corner of the player?
I'm showing right-hand corner of 15, 19, 25.
Okay, that's the time of day, or approximately, I guess that's the time, the camera's time of day. We'll go with your then 15, that's 1500, 19 minutes and 25 seconds.
That's all.
Okay, I'm gonna start playing this officer, and I want you to tell me when you believe Mr. Hoffman starts moving again.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this, because there's a whole line of cases that the video could be stopped during my objection, please, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Conley. There's a whole line of cases that talk about when a witness was not present for the purpose of the video, commenting on a video that he wasn't there at the time. He can see what we can see. The point of going over this line of questioning is extremely argumentative. He testified several minutes. The defense counsel wants to argue it's not several minutes. Making us go through the exercise of going through the video is cumulative and not necessary. There's, like I said, there's a whole line of cases that talk about if a witness can't add to our understanding of the video because they weren't there, that is cumulative in its objection. And so I would object to that, please.
Your Honor, goes to Mr. Wall's credibility as well as his memory of the events of that day and what he was told by other persons. He testified, essentially he was told by other persons Mr. Hoffman had been still for some time. I think it's relevant for him for us to replay this segment of the video based on his testimony and see exactly how long he thinks Mr. Hoffman was standing still, because how long Mr. Hoffman was standing still is what he has testified as a basis for when he can issue a trespass warrant.
Your Honor, this doesn't go to impeach his memory because he wasn't there. If he has a question from other officers for how long did he was standing there or whatever, first of all, the video speaks for itself, so we can argue that. No witness can testify as to something where no one was there and we have a video. And if they want to testify what the officers, he wants to question about what the officer did see, then perhaps the other officer that's here can question that officer. But to question this officer that wasn't there, and we have a video that shows it, we can argue that. Asking this witness doesn't matter, because it's on the video and he wasn't there. So it's cumulative and it's argumentative.
Just for the record, what we're looking at, there are no officers there at all. The court is being played now. And basically, this witness is being asked to sit here and look at this and determine what the video recording reflects as the length of time, which frankly I can calculate. And so can Mr. Friday and so can Mr. Golden.
I can rephrase my question, Your Honor.
Okay, just on that objection, it's sustained.
Officer, this is when you testified a moment ago that Mr. Hoffman stopped at some point, and that was the basic point at which he was no longer traveling along the roadway, correct? And this is the point you described.
This area.
So you didn't witness him stopping there that day, did you?
No, sir, I didn't. Your video provided that to me just a minute ago. I've not seen this video.
So you didn't have that information when you issued a trespass warrant, did you, officer?
No, sir, we didn't. I didn't have this.
You just trespassed him because you didn't want him on the airport property.
No, sir. The other officer trespassed him prior to my getting there.
Also, to be fair, it said that Mr. Hoffman's signs were expressing an idea of political nature.
He's free to hold whatever sign he wants to.
So if he had just been walking without holding signs, nobody would have bothered him from your department.
No, sir. But he was stopped. He was stationary when the officers arrived.
No further question, Your Honor.
Do you redirect?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the court's patience with the municipal prosecutors here. Sergeant, if you would, defense counsel asked if you stop cars for no reason or driving through that area. If the car was stopped in the middle of the road and there was signage in the vehicle, would authorities from JA respond appropriately?
Yes, sir. We do respond to vehicles stopped in the road as well as on the side of the road to inquire if they're broken down, if they need assistance, or if they're just waiting.
Okay, and obviously if people are just walking through that area, using it as a regular thoroughfare and just walking through, you don't stop those people and trespass those people?
No, so we do stop them from time to time and inquire if they need assistance or what their purpose is, but they will, I'll say, we'll use 9 out of 10 people are going to or from the airport to catch a flight or walk back to a motel.
Where's the facility on the airport where somebody can get an application or apply to be able to have a permit or what have you, to be able to demonstrate, hold signs, do things like that? Actually, let me back up a little bit. We went into a little bit before. There is an application process. If somebody wants to hold a sign, demonstrate what have you on the property, that's something that is allowable by the airport.
Yes, sir.
And do they, deny applications they don't like a certain point of view, to your knowledge?
Judge, Your Honor, the witness already stated that he is not aware of how they process the application.
Look, I assume that's what his answer is going to be now.
I don't know the process, no, sir.
Okay.
I just know there is an application process.
You know where a person goes in the airport?
To the three-story administration building, as you're approaching the airport, it's to the left, approximately 200 yards from where we were at.
Okay. So if a person wanted to go to the application area from the route that the defendant was traveling, where would they go?
I'm sorry, can you make sure
On
I
the route
understand?
that the defendant was traveling, if a person wanted to apply to be able to have a permit, where would they go?
To the administration building.
Where was that in relation to where the defendant was walking?
It's on the opposite side of the road from where he's standing.
Across the street?
Across the street, yes, sir.
Okay.
Across that street. That's a one-way road coming into the airport. It's Yankee Clipper. It's a one-way road coming in. And it's on the opposite side of the road from where we approached him on video.
Okay. Now, if a person has a valid permit, is there any way for you guys to know about that?
Yes, we're notified.
You're notified. If somebody's given a permit, you're notified.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's no way that the defendant would have had a valid permit and been on the side of the road and you not notified.
No, sir.
How are you notified?
We're notified via email from the Business Development Department or External Affairs, and they advise it's a ripple effect. It comes from our director to our lieutenants to the sergeants, and we administer that information to our officers.
Okay, so at the time that y'all was then approaching, and by the way, any of the officers that were involved in this case, would they have been similarly notified as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when they came upon the defendant, they would have known that he did not have a permit to be there at that time.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned that people have demonstrated at the airport before.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
How long have you been working for JA?
19 and a half years.
Okay. And over that time, would you be able to put a number on how many times you've seen people demonstrating there?
25, 30
Okay.
times.
And that would be of a political, a religious nature? What sort of flavor? Or
It's a variety, a wide variety. It could be airlines. It could be personnel for the air carriers. It could be have sky caps, people demonstrating wanting higher wages, or the airlines are protesting about something. If they have a strike nationwide, they obviously go to all the different airports. And the airport allows them to do that, allows them a position to do that. It's not completely out of the public viewer area, but it's not in the mainstream of things either.
Based on your knowledge of this street right here that is shown on the video, describe that for me, if you will. Where does that street go into?
That particular road, Yankee Clipper, is a one-way, three-lane, one-way road coming into the airport.
Okay.
And it allows you, from this location here, it allows you 3 or 4 different ways to go.
Okay, and so is that the place where anybody who's entering the airport, that's where they go?
That's one of the entrances, or one of the ways to come into the airport, yes. There's, as I said, there's 2 or 3 different ways to approach the airport.
How much further up the road, you said it branches off? Does it like branch off, one for parking, one for terminal, like that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. It branches off to other roads going off of that road. But as you get closer to the airport, there are for parking, for motel, departing flights, return flights, rental car returns.
Okay. How much further up the road is this branching off?
I don't have tenths of a mile. I'd have to give you an approximate.
Yeah, right. I'm not asking for an exact measurement, but it's the best of your knowledge.
To the best of my knowledge, it's probably another half mile.
Another half mile. Okay. All right. And is it in the direction that the defendant was walking half mile down roughly, or was it where the defendant was walking from that is half a mile?
From where we made contact with him, the initial officer made contact with him, I would say it's approximately another half a mile up to where rental car lane and everything starts branching off.
Okay, so where we're looking at in the video right now, you saw the video cut in your other screen?
I still have more.
Is it in the direction that the camera is facing, or is it behind the camera?
No, it's behind the camera. He's facing oncoming. This camera's facing oncoming traffic.
Based on the track. Okay, perfect. Okay, I may have a look around.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Nothing further on.
No, they exceeded scope across quite a bit.
Oh, I'm not going to object to a big cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, just so we're clear. The general direction of travel is shown on the video. It's towards the administration building.
Correct.
And Mr. Hoffman would have reached a place where he could cross the road to the administration building prior to reaching where all these roads branched off to.
There is no location for him to cross the road. It's not for pedestrian traffic.
There is not a pedestrian crossing, correct?
No.
Are there any pedestrian crossings anywhere across Yankee Clipper Drive?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any provisions in state law that allow people to cross roads where there is no pedestrian crossing within a reaching distance?
If they can cross the road safely,
So if he had reached next to the administration building and determined he could cross the road safely, he would have been moving in the right direction to get to that administration building.
had he been moving in that direction,
His general direction of movement throughout the video until you say he stopped was in that direction, wasn't it?
yes, sir.
One question, you're not required to have a permit to walk down the road, only a permit to hold signs while walking down the road, is that correct?
Object to legal conclusion, Your Honor.
I'm asking for your interpretation when you commit your trespass.
If you know.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Yes, sir. For you to issue a trespass warning, does a person need to have a permit to walk down the road? Can you trespass somebody for walking down the road without a permit?
No, sir. I can trespass somebody for not having business purposes at the airport who has stopped and standing along the side of the road.
So somebody standing there communicating an idea on the side of the road, passing motorists, if somebody needs to trespass, they don't have a permit from the airport.
We ask them to go ahead and move along.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any other questions?
No other questions.
Do you want him to remain outside? or-
Yes, please, Your Honor.
Okay, if you step down, sir, just remain outside. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. State calls next witness.
The state calls Officer Jennifer Cruz.
Officer Cruz, please. to be sworn, please, ma'am?
Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Have a seat on the witness stand over here, please, ma'am.
Can you state your name
Officer Jennifer Cruz,
and your where are you employed?
at Jacksonville Aviation Authority Police Department
How long?
for 4 years.
I'm going to ask you about the day that the video was taken that you watched. Were you one of the first officers to come to the scene where this occurred with Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Were you traveling alone in your own car, or were you riding along with the other officer we saw in the video?
I was traveling alone in my own vehicle.
And were you ahead of the other officer or behind him?
I don't recall.
That's
I know we watched the video, but I don't recall.
When you pulled up,
Mhm.
what observations do you have of Mr. Hoffman?
The observations that I remember from that day was that he was standing still and he was holding 2 signs.
What do the signs read?
If I remember correctly, I think one said F, the TSA, and the other one said police state.
And you and the other officer, did you approach Mr. Hoffman first?
I think that we approached him together.
And did Mr. Hoffman, when you approached, say anything?
Just, I guess, greeted us.
At any point, did Mr. Hoffman indicate that he was en route or traveling anywhere?
No.
Are you certain that when you came upon Mr. Hoffman, that he was in fact standing still?
That's what it appeared to me, that he was standing still. And I know we were dispatched to the call. We were dispatched to Yankee Clipper. Guess
Okay,
that
and
might
when
be
you were
where it was.
dispatched, were you dispatched to that general location from which she was located?
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with Yankee Clipper.
Mhm.
However, my question is, how far ahead of you down Yankee Clipper can you see on this particular stretch? So, for example, on a road that turns, you're not able to see what's around the corner, but on a straight road, you can see some distance ahead of you.
Right.
Were you able to see some distance ahead of you when you were approaching Mr. Hoffman in
Yes.
your vehicle?
Yes.
About how far?
About how far ahead? Like,
Yeah.
Towards the airport or?
No, towards him, like, how far in advance did you see him?
From the time that I guess, came on the roadway, I probably saw them 100 feet ahead of me. Not real good with distance and
Oh, what about time? I mean, you see him and then it took you how long to get to him?
probably less than 3 minutes.
Okay, so within that less than 3-minute time frame, was there any movement or relocation of Mr. Hoffman?
No.
So he remained in the same place that he was from the moment that you were able to see him
Yes.
and your vehicle arriving to the scene. There was no movement whatsoever.
No.
And from the moment that you were able to see him from your vehicle, did you see that he was holding anything?
Saw the signs.
Okay, so you saw the signs from the moment that you were able to see him.
Correct.
And at any point did he put the signs down?
I don't recall if he put them down when we approached him, but not as I was traveling to him, no.
So, so just to be clear, so as far as you can remember, the around or less than 3 minutes that you were able to see Mr. Hoffman until the point where you encountered him outside of your vehicle, he may have been holding up the signs, but he definitely had not moved.
Correct.
And can you clarify, please, how was he holding his signs?
I would assume like this.
Okay. Let the record reflect that she has her arms above her head. So he was not carrying them like he would, a bag of groceries.
No.
He had them held up above his head.
Yes.
And one last question. As far as your time working as a police officer for JAA, if there was a vehicle stopped on the side of the road, and let's say in the area that Mr. Hoffman is standing, would you be called to approach the vehicle?
Yes.
And what would be your standard interaction if somebody were in the vehicle?
Usually our standard interaction is to make sure the vehicle isn't broken down, but most of the time when we encounter people on the side of the road there, it's because they're not sure where the courtesy waiting lot is, and they're waiting to pick up someone at the airport.
And at any point, if they communicate with you that they are in fact trying to get to move forward for the to catch an airplane, for the facilitation of air traffic, you allow them to move forward, correct?
Yes.
No further questions, John.
All right, Mr. Cross,
Officer Cruz, you said that you saw Mr. Hoffman standing still for less than 3 minutes.
just trying to please.
Officer Cruz, you said you saw Mr. Hoffman standing still for less than 3 minutes, correct?
That was an approximation from the time that I saw him and approached him.
Was it less than 2?
I don't recall.
Would seeing video again help refresh your recollection?
I mean, if you want me to watch the video again, sure.
Officer, I want you to tell me when you think you can see your vehicle approaching Mr. Hoffman here.
Okay.
You see your vehicle yet, officer?
No, I do not.
See it yet?
No.
Is that your vehicle, officer?
That is my vehicle.
Back up just a little bit here. Is that it? We're seeing this coming around the corner?
Yes.
Okay. So we're at 3:20 and 23 seconds by the clock on the camera, right?
Yes.
So let's go from 3:20 and 23 seconds and see how long it takes you to get to pull up to Mr. Hoffman.
Here we go.
So I got that to about 20 seconds before he says, here we go.
Correct. But I'd like to state for the record, from the time I was dispatched and traveling on Dixie Clipper and made a U-turn under the overpass to come back around on Yankee Clipper to make contact with him, that was probably about 3 minutes.
During that 3 minutes, did you see Mr. Hoffman standing still, Officer Cruz?
Yes, I did.
During that 3 minutes, you saw him standing still.
From the time that I visually saw him from Dixie Clipper, he did not move. And then by the time I traveled up under the overpass and came back around on Yankee Clipper, he was still standing in the same place.
So you saw him before that 3:23 and 20 seconds.
Correct.
And how did you see him before that?
Because I was traveling on the other side of the roadway on Dixie Clipper Drive.
Okay, and you couldn't tell that he had appreciably moved from where you thought you saw him as you were driving around?
He was still in the same general area.
Same general area.
Correct.
You can't testify he was standing in the exact same spot.
Not in the same exact spot, but in the same general area.
You can't testify that he didn't take a 30-second break and then take another step, and 30-second break and another step again.
I'm not sure what you're asking me, sir. I was dispatched to an area and he was in the same general area I was dispatched to.
What was that dispatch call for?
For someone standing on the side of the road with signs.
Okay. So he was holding signs up like this with both hands. Where was the camera he was holding?
From what I remember that day, he had 2 cameras attached to his person, and he also had one in his hand.
So where was the one that was in his hand and he was holding those signs up like this, Officer Cruz?
That's a question you have to ask your defendant.
So when you pulled up, he's holding both hands like this.
That's what I recall.
Well, officer, there are 2 cameras that have been played today. One is the Sony cam, the handheld, right?
Correct.
The other is the body cam, one of the body cams. Because you were present when the state attorney's office and I downloaded the videos off those cameras, weren't you?
Yes.
And you remember that we had one of the body cams he was wearing that didn't have anything on it? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And so you remember that one of the cameras we've been showing you from today is the Sony cam and one is the body cam.
Yes.
And that Sony cam has to be held in somebody's hand, doesn't it?
Does the Sony Cam not have a strap where you can hold it on your hand and hold something else in your hand at the same time?
So he was holding the Sony cam like this with the sign up. Is that your testimony, Officer Cruz?
I don't recall, sir.
Where were you when you were dispatching officer, or when you were dispatching the officer's location?
I don't recall where I was exactly at the time I was dispatched.
Was there any profanity on Mr. Hoffman's signs, or were there underlines in place of certain letters? Do you remember?
I know that it said F question mark K, the TSA.
Okay. So he tried to make his family friendly as he could with that.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Also objection mischaracterizing F question mark K as family friendly as well.
Officer Cruz, do you have any involvement or knowledge regarding the process that happens when somebody submits an application to engage in protest at KAA property?
Can you repeat the question?
Do you have any knowledge as far as what happens once somebody submits the application to KAA? Do you know who makes the decision about whether or not the permit is granted?
No, I do not.
Do you know the process they go through?
No, I do not.
Do you know what rules, regulations, or guidelines they have for who does or doesn't get a permit?
No, I do not.
No further questions.
Can you redirect?
Yes, sir. There was a lot of questioning about the manner in which the defendant was holding the sign. Really, the main point is this. When you saw the defendant at all times, was he simply carrying these signs in a manner commensurate with somebody who's carrying something, or was he displaying the sign?
The signs were displayed. I don't remember exactly how he was holding them, but they were displayed.
I don't know if it-
Anything else for this witness, Mr. Frank?
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Just very close to closing arguments.
Okay. Can this witness be excused as well as your other witness?
Yes, sir.
You're excused, ma'am, you're welcome to stay if you want to, but you're excused.
May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, one quote I really like is you're entitled to your own opinion and not your own facts. In a motion to dismiss, the state gets its own facts to traverse. And their facts have to be accepted by the court. If they're not entitled to their own conclusions of law, those are for the court to make. And there are no disputes of material fact here. Everything in dispute is a question of law. In one breath, the state agrees that JAA is a public entity in the traverse, despite all the protesting. I think I counted 5 different times, or 6 different times, Mr. Hoffman was told it was private property. In the next breath, the state claims that the area where Mr. Hoffman was located is not a traditional public forum. The state fails to cite any case that holds that the side of the street is not a traditional public forum, despite numerous cases that say it is the quintessential public forum. State attempts to claim its regulation is content neutral because it provides an outlet if one only seeks the permission of the airport authority. And says that because JAA regulations have more limitations and reasons for denial than the Burke case, where the 11th Circuit struck down a permit requirement, that they're less arbitrary. And Your Honor, a direct report to the Burke case. It involves a case of the 11th Circuit. Your Honor may be familiar that for years there have been protests at Augusta National Golf Course during the Masters. Well, the city of Augusta got tired of Ms. Burke and her protesters, and so they passed a statute. Ms. Burke took it to the 11th Circuit. The 11th Circuit made clear, requiring a permit to stand on public property in protest is a prior restraint and is not permissible. Despite the state's denial, this case is exactly like Juice for Jesus. Except in the Juice for Jesus case, the public authority was honest about what it was doing. They admitted we were banning all speech and creating basically a First Amendment free zone. The airport wasn't allowed to do it. The court said, hey, the terminal, that's fine. You have business to conduct. Where you have business to conduct, that is the operation of government, that is not a traditional public forum. But the court didn't allow them to extend that to the streets and sidewalks leading up to the airport. JAA wants to argue that, again, back to changing, that they're different from Juice for Jesus and different from Burt because they have well-established grounds on which a permit can be denied. I want to direct the court's attention to page 5 of the JAA regulations. The state's argument is, well, JAA has 17 regulations, and that takes all arbitrariness out of it, it takes all capriciousness out of it, and it gives an objective standard. Your Honor, the ones I'm going to read are anything but objective. Number 1 on page 5, A1. These are reasons that the entity these are reasons that the authority, the entity is the person seeking the permit. These are reasons the authority can reject an application for protesting or anything else. 1, the entity for any reason does not fully meet the qualification standards and requirements established by the authority. Which requirements, which qualifications or other standards, it doesn't really say. Number 2, the proposed use of the airport will create a safety or security hazard. All they have to do is say it does. Number 4, the proposed use may result in a financial loss or hardship to the authority. All they have to do is say that it may, not have to show it. Skipping down to number 12. The entity does not demonstrate financial capacity or responsibility to undertake the proposed use of the airport. And 13, the entity cannot obtain a bond or insurance in the type and amounts required by the authority for the proposed use of the airport. Your Honor, the very thing that was struck down in Burke was the fact that they required this Burke to get an indemnity policy in an amount satisfactory to the county attorney in order to protest. That is the exact same thing JAA is requiring people to do here in order to get a permit. Moving on to 15, the entity's proposed use of the airport has been or could be detrimental to the authority, the airport, the lessees, sub-lessees, operators, permittees, or users. Number 16, the entity seeks terms and conditions which are inconsistent with the authority's policies and or is stated in a request for qualifications and or proposals issued by the authority. And finally, Your Honor, the very definition of arbitrary, discretion, and content, the entity's interest and or the proposed use are inconsistent with the authority's mission, values, goals, objectives, the best interest of the authority, or airport sponsor assurances. The state argues that this is a content regulation, this is a reasonable time posting that. Your Honor, those restrictions that I just read off are nothing but arbitrary restrictions subject to enforcement on the whim. This is not a content neutral restriction. It is a wholesale ban on all speech except that explicitly approved of by JAA at their discretion. Which brings us to the Catrone case. The Catrone case is a case out of St. Petersburg. There, the city was doing something very similar to what the airport attempts to do here. The difference is the city there actually passed an ordinance to allow their officers to trespass people from public sidewalks and public parks. Here, the airport officers just do it because somebody told them they could. They don't remember who. In the Catrone case, the state said it's okay for us to issue these trespass warnings, and it doesn't violate due process because there is a due process procedure that if the person refuses to abide by the trespass warning, effectively an injunction, they can be arrested, and then they can challenge that in just like you are here today. But the 11th Circuit said that's not good enough. The court's answer was, we are not persuaded that this state forum, hearing on academic arrest, affords sufficient procedural protections. The process available in state court is beside the point. A challenge to the charge of trespass is not a challenge against the issuance of what is effectively an injunction, in this case against Mr. Hoffman's liberty interests. The controlling court also had a few other interesting statements to make. An individual's decision to remain in a public place of his choice is as much a part of his liberty interest, as much part of his liberty as the freedom of movement inside frontiers as a part of our heritage, or the right to move to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct. The court went on to say, citing a few other Florida cases, that all Florida citizens have a right, under the Florida Constitution, to chat on the public street, stroll aimlessly, and saunter down the sidewalk. Your Honor, what the state is doing here is nothing more than a restriction on Mr. Hoffman's First Amendment right to walk down the side of the road as provided in Chapter 316 Florida Traffic Code, where it states pedestrians are allowed to walk on the shoulder of a generally available highway. And Sergeant Wall testified, generally the public is allowed to travel up and down this road at will. Mr. Hoffman, Your Honor, was singled out, not because he didn't go get a permit that he shouldn't have to get in the first place, but because of what the sign said. The state also relies on the fact that Mr. Hoffman didn't tell the officers that he was going to do a public records request. He doesn't have to. We all have a right not to answer those type of questions. If I'm walking down the street, it is nobody's business, especially no law enforcement officer's business, where I'm choosing to go. If they ask a question and it's a consensual encounter, I can say I choose not to answer and I can walk away. They didn't let Mr. Hoffman continue walking in the direction that he wanted to go. They never offered him that option. They never said, Mr. Hoffman, you can't stand here. You can move, but you can't stand here. If you want to keep moving in the direction you're going, go right ahead, have a nice day. We may even hold traffic for you to cross the street. No, they didn't do that. They said, get off this property, this is private property. Your Honor, the Supreme Court already answered that question. In the case of Jackson Shaw versus the Airport Authority, Jackson Shaw Company versus Jacksonville Aviation Authority, the 11th Circuit certified to the Florida Supreme Court a question about dealing with the airport and what its obligations were as a public entity. And the court starts out, the very start of its opinion, is that the Jacksonville Aviation Authority is unquestionably a public entity, and that makes its property public property. And while the Supreme Court has while the Supreme Court has allowed public property owners in their landlord capacity to restrict a person's First Amendment rights in certain locations, such as at the terminal in the Harry Christian case or the Jews for Jesus case, they have never allowed that restriction to extend beyond terminal boundaries or beyond the administrative offices. It's also important to note in the video. I guess the court's going to have to go back and look at it again because there's some dispute about whether or not Mr. Hoffman stopped.
Obviously, I will.
Yes. Our position is it's clear that if Mr. Hoffman stopped at any point, and we do acknowledge there were 2 points where he clearly had stopped for a moment. Stopping to take a break, because you can hear him breathing heavy on the video, I think. Stopping to take a break should not subject you to a trespass from public property just because you're holding a couple of signs. The state wants to say that, hey, we've got all the elements here, we've got everything we need to survive a motion to dismiss. They forgot one thing. The person directing the other person to leave under the trespass statute actually has to have the authority to issue that warrant. In the case of a private property owner, it's not a big deal. That property owner or his designee can anytime say that they want somebody off the property. But when we're dealing with a governmental officer police officer, an officer of the state of Florida, that officer cannot violate the Constitution and then use that as a basis for a criminal charge. The state says Mr. Hoffman had ample opportunity to leave. Ample opportunity is meaningless if the order is in violation of the Constitution and not lawful in the first instance. Your Honor, this entire prosecution is a farce. The law is established that the streets, including the sides of the streets, are open for the passage of all, including Michael Hoffman, including people like Mr. Hoffman who don't hold signs and communicate ideas in what the court has found to be the quintessential public court. We ask the court to dismiss the charges in this case, void the trespass warning issued by JAA, and tell the state once again that the First Amendment does still have meaning and people are still free to walk on the sides of the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friday. State Attorney, please.
May it please the court?
Yes, ma'am.
The state is relying on state v. Presume, where we filed the traverse for the motion to dismiss, and there, we specifically denied a material fact concerning whether or not Mr. Hoffman was in fact standing or was in fact en route. We are specifically denying defendant's facts in paragraph 3 of his motion. The state's contention that the defendant, in fact, was not en route to obtain public records, but was standing, picketing, or protesting on the side of the road. In addition, in reference to the due process argument that was brought up in the Catron v. City of St. Petersburg case, the government there held that the court held there that the government must provide notice and an opportunity at a meaningful time in a meaningful manner, although the notice and hearing may be postponed until after the deprivation. Here, there is no due process issue because a warning was given to Mr. Hoffman of the proper procedure to receive permission to be on the property for the purposes of picketing or protesting, demonstrating, or other similar acts. The defendant was given ample opportunity to leave or continue on his route, but he refused. And addressing the traditional public forum argument, the state is agreeing that JAA, the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, is a quasi-government entity. So their property that they own, we will concede that is public.
At this time, I'm going to inform you that this is Jacksonville Aviation Authority private property, and right now at this time you're trespassing unless you have permission from the Jacksonville Aviation Authority to be here and handle this situation. That this is Jacksonville Aviation Authority private property. You're being asked to leave, and if you have said before, this is Jacksonville Aviation Authority private property. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. As I said before, and I'll say again.
Okay.
That's what we've been instructed to tell you, that you're trespassing on private property. You have the right to leave now. We'll give you time to leave. If you refuse to leave, then you'll be placed under arrest for trespassing on private property.
Okay. If you're wanting to protest or hold signs like you're doing, you have to get the permission of the airport authority because you are on private property. Okay? You can't stand on the airport's property with your signs like this, okay?
All right. Airport public property, but okay.
This is private property.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
I'm asking what you're doing here.
So is it in your business what I'm doing here?
Right now it is, because right now you're on private property.
This is not private property. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know this is public property.
No, it's not. It's not public property. Did you go through external affairs and get permission to
I don't need it. This is public property. I'm going to stand out here and I'm going to tell everybody that you guys are liars and thieves, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You should know. No, I do not.
You don't have any identification on you. Okay. You know it's a state law to provide identification when a police
You're
officer
so
is
full of
conducting
crap.
an
You're
investigation.
such a liar. You
No,
guys,
I'm not, sir.
you either don't know what the hell you're talking about or you're a liar. There's no legal obligation for me to provide you with any identification unless I'm being detained. I'm all right.
And you are?
None of your business.
Okay. I'm Lieutenant Stevens. I'm the interim director of safety and security here. You're trespassing.
This is public property, sir.
So that's where y'all have a misconception. The authority here owns this property. We're not city of Jacksonville, and we keep
Your
telling
state of Florida.
It doesn't matter. This is private property. Now as it
Okay,
is,
so
I'm gonna give you one last warning that you're on private property, sir. I've told you that.
And let me clearly understand, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. Okay, Lieutenant Stevens.
Yes.
You are claiming that this is not private property.
Absolutely.
Now you're telling me that if I do not leave this public property, that you will arrest me for trespassing.
Not public. You're confused.
No, you're the one that's confused. You're the one that's confused, and you're going to find out about that. You're telling me that I have to leave. That's all I want to know.
That it's not public property. We have a right. We can give you a venue.
All right. Well, then I'm leaving. I'm leaving.
You need to do is go bear law. If you get an attorney to prove it, then come see me. But other than that, don't come back here on private property. Fair enough.
This is not private property. But I'm leaving. I'm not arguing with you. I'm going to leave, but I know you're wrong, and I'm telling you you're wrong.
And I'm telling you, you're wrong. We have an attorney that's already investigated through city attorneys telling us this is private property.
Well, city attorneys aren't always
You need to go get your attorney to file a suit. If you come back,
I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave this public property under protest and duress, under threat of arrest.
You do that.
And you guys ought to all be ashamed of yourselves. What do you guys have against somebody expressing their right to free speech?
Sir, it's private property. They have a right to restrict your usage. It's
You
a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that airports are not First Amendment venues.
You're absolutely, you're 100% wrong.
All right, well then go look it up.
I don't need to look it up. All right, I'm waiting on him.
Once you leave this property today, you have been given a trespass.
I'm gonna come back in here.
You've been given a trespass.
I'm gonna come back in here and do a public records request. I dare you to stop me from doing a public records
You've been
request.
trespassed from this property.
This is
if you
public
come back,
property.
then you're going to get arrested. I hope you
I'm
understand.
gonna go in
that.
there and I will do a public records
Okay.
request.
Try me.
Arrest me for it. I dare you.
You will be.
I dare you.
You will be.
What's your name?
If you don't do it, then do it now.
What's your name?
We can go down and take care of it now.
We want to get
What's your name?
Officer Mitchell.
Officer
You can take care
Mitchell,
of it
you're a
now, yeah.
disgrace.
I don't
You're a
care.
disgrace.
Don't care.
You're a violator of your oath to the
Oh,
Constitution.
Yeah? Well, that's fine. That's fine.
You violated your oath to the Constitution. You're a disgrace to the United States of America.
I've got enough for the
Let's go,
United
Thomas.
States Attorney, so don't worry.
That's right. That's right. Get on in your vehicle and leave.
Go home and tell your families what brave men and women you are and how you violate people's First Amendment rights.
It is public. However, it is not a traditional public forum. The Kershaw case, which was referred to earlier, stated that the court determined that airports are not traditional public forums, and therefore the regulations the regulations need only be reasonable, and that an airport is not a traditional public forum. The property the defendant was on is owned by the JAA for the purposes of facilitating air travel, thus not a public forum. A traditional public forum has been held to be property that has a principal purpose, the free exchange of ideas. However, the property the defendant was on, JAA's regulations promote safety and only regulate the areas of JAA property that it considers unsafe, i.e. the roadway. The roadway is JAA property. However, it's still a non-public forum. Therefore, the JAA is entitled to have regulations on time, place, and manner, so long as they are viewpoint neutral and content neutral, and so long as they don't chill any more speech than necessary. The regulations here, which were pointed out, are viewpoint neutral, are content neutral, and in addition, Mr. Hoffman never even attempted to file the application, so he would have no standing in which to argue or challenge the constitutionality of JAA's regulations. In addition, those regulations, however, do provide for alternative channels. As we heard today, JAA does allow for people to come on property. Time, place, manner restrictions are placed, but they are reasonable and they're not so overbroad where they allow unfettered discretion for somebody to deny on whatever basis they feel necessary. There are 17 different purposes for denying an application. Finally, the application simply requires that the applicant agree to bind the provisions of the JAA rules and regulations. And again, there is not unbridled discretion given. It delineates specific reasons an application may be denied. We ask the court to deny the defendant's motion to dismiss.
Okay. Mr. Davis, let me ask you one question. Is it the state's, because I want to make sure I've got your position correct. Is it the state's position that JAA is a quasi-governmental authority, but the piece of property that Mr. Hoffman was standing on the side of the roadway is public property?
All of JA property is going to be public property because they are a quasi-government entity.
Okay.
However,
But I understand the rest of your argument, but you agree that the JAA, the airport, and including where Mr. Hoffman was public property?
yes,
Okay. It's also your position that JAA has the authority to regulate property,
because
right?
it's a non-public forum, and airports have been determined to be non-public forums, and therefore they are entitled to have regulations that are content neutral, viewpoint neutral, that regulate time, place, and manner, which they do, and they are content neutral and viewpoint neutral, and they don't give unfettered discretion to one single person to deny arbitrarily a application. There are rules, there are guidelines, and they are not in violation of any constitutional right. They are exactly in line with what the court deems to be reasonable for regulations when it comes to restricting a non-public forums area for people to express their freedom of expression.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if I may as well, I just wanted to add that specifically the airport had a specific location for people who want to protest that was testified to. In this case, you have somebody who's holding up signs in a place where people enter onto the airport, just a little distance away from where, it's a one-way entrance. People are entering, trying to find out where to go in terms of branched off in the parking lot, airport, what have you. So there's a reasonable reason to have these regulations, including not having people holding up signs at that particular location. So just to add to the reasonableness of the procedures they have in place, the place where the defendant was holding up and displaying these signs was in a place that causes a safety risk to motorists coming in. And it was on the airport property at the time, which, as mentioned earlier, is a non-traditional public forum to be expressing those views.
Perfect. Thank you.
Briefly, Your Honor. First of all, Your Honor, no evidence was presented of a particular safety hazard. The man who's standing across the street from another flashing sign that was changing its message that we saw in the video. So JAA themselves had to put a sign right near where he was standing, flashing messages moving. The question of whether Mr. Hoffman was standing or was still around is immaterial question before the court. As the court Cantrone said, you have the right to saunter or wander aimlessly. I think that would necessarily include stopping for a moment. Your Honor, I don't have a case because I had not quite understood that the state's argument today was going to be this issue of standing versus continuing to move. But I will tell the court, and I'd be happy to provide a supplemental authority if the court needs it. There's a recent case out of the Ferguson protest, where the police officers in Ferguson, Missouri, were telling protesters, you have to keep moving, you have to keep moving, you can't stand still for more than so many minutes. And the federal court there said, no, that is impermissible. You're violating people's First Amendment rights when they're walking on the sidewalk by telling them they can't stop and stand.
Okay. If you want to send me that case and make sure the state has it as well, that's fine.
Yes, sir. Your Honor, the next issue is the state has blatantly miscited both the Harry Christian case and the Jesus case. I point the court first to the lead case where it says that regulation governs only the terminal. The Port Authority permits solicitation and distribution on the sidewalks outside the terminal buildings. Both the lead case and the Jesus case repeatedly point to the fact that the terminal is different from the streets and sidewalks leading into the airport. They don't say that the airport is not a traditional public forum. They say the airport terminal is not a traditional public forum. They wanted to talk about the Trone and notice an opportunity for a hearing after the deprivation. Again, they're arguing exactly what the city of Trone argued. Mr. Hoffman was given a warning. He was given ample opportunity to leave, and he didn't. Because, Your Honor, and the reason it violated due process to come, the reason it violates due process here, is the city did not have a method. They said it could be after the fact. That's fine. But there's no method in the airport regulations, and Mr. Hoffman was not informed of any method of who he could talk to have this trespass on an employee. Had they had some type of method, they might have survived. But this court found reasonableness standard for either their safety regulations, their protest and ticketing regulations, or any other regulations we've talked about here today. It is undeniable that the court must apply strict scrutiny. We have a traditional public forum, the side of the street. We have a person who's clearly engaged in political speech. And we have regulations that provide for a great deal of discretion that we pray to the court. Those things add up to one thing only, and that is the strict scrutiny standard. The state has not shown any compelling interest or compelling narrative reason why the rules that they want Mr. Hoffman to follow are constitutional. Instead, they argue about whether he was seeing still Hoffman. It doesn't matter, Your Honor. All that matters is that Mr. Hoffman was engaged in political speech on the side of the road when he said the public forum. Thank you.
All right, thank
Mr. Gold, do you have something else? Did you have something to add?
Yes, I did, if I may, Your Honor. Be very brief.
Yes.
I did want to mention, because it may have gotten lost just in all the argument, as far as the rules of traverse are concerned, I mean, I think Your Honor knows that once it's been traversed, the motion has to be denied. And in this case, we filed the traverse. We have a factual dispute. This is not something where facts are not in dispute. So as a procedural matter, this motion should be denied simply for that reason. So when the defense said there's no disagreement as to fact, that's not correct. We filed a traverse. Traverse the facts. And so, the court doesn't even need to go into all this other analysis. Motion to dismiss has to be denied if you don't have an agreement on the facts. And that's in our file traverse. Additionally, I agree that this case doesn't stand or fall whether or not the defendant was standing or walking, whatever. The main part, and really the only reason why standing has anything to do with anything, is to show that this isn't somebody who's just walking through, this isn't somebody who's just using the streets for travel purposes. It's the standing in conjunction with displaying the sign. And, it's possible the defendant could have been moving along very slowly with the sign. That wouldn't have changed the analysis at all. The whole point of bringing up standing or walking or what have you was only to show that his purpose there was to hold the sign, not to use the streets for any other purpose. It was there to demonstrate. And there was a process that he put in place for him to be able to demonstrate. If he wanted to, he didn't bother to go through that process. So whether or not the process the defense thinks is sufficient or not, the defendant never actually went and did any of that process and got denied anything. So for defense to get up here and speculate that the airport is simply discriminating against people because they don't like what they say, nobody knows that because the defendant never actually went to the bottom to attempt to get a permit. So he really doesn't have standing to object to those procedures in place because he never went through them, he was never denied, or anything of the sort. And this whole argument that maybe he was on his way to the permit place because it was in that direction doesn't really matter because the whole point is he needs to get the permit first. You get the permit first, then you demonstrate. That's how it's supposed to be done. So that's the state's argument.
The Burke case does address the standing issue. You don't have to apply for an unconstitutional permit in order to challenge the unconstitutional permitting process. That's never been held required in the Burke Amendment context. So I'm not aware of that. As to the Burke's issue, Your Honor, we'll accept the facts. The state's facts is set forth in their traverse is truly correct for the purpose of this hearing. But even their facts, as alleged in their traverse, don't add up to a valid trespass point to Mr. Hoffman because they didn't have the authority to trespass him in the first place, and therefore there could be no arrest for trespass or prosecution. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. And obviously, I'm going to take this motion under advisement, a couple things before we move on. Mr. Friday provided me, right at the very beginning, with JAA rules and regulations, and he reverted them in his argument. Does the state object, it hasn't been admitted evidence, does the state object to me having these, reading these?
No, in fact, it was our understanding that that would be an evidence on the judicial notice or an evidence.
We asked my oral motion was for the
Judicial notice. I'll take judicial notice.
Right.
Everybody agrees these are the rules that
Yes.
apply. Okay, I'll just take judicial notice of these. The second thing is, obviously, this motion is a little bit out of the ordinary. It's not the standard motion to dismiss, motion to suppress. I feel like I need to do some research, consider it, and not make a spur of the moment ruling. Having said that, the arrest date apparently is August 12th, and I don't want to run into a speedy trial issue. So the next question is, Mr. Friday, is speedy trial going to be an issue? Is your client going to waive it? Or do I need to make a very fast decision on it's a complicated issue and just set this case for trial?
Your Honor, I have not discussed the speedy trial issue with my client. If I might discuss it with him.
Yes, sir. I just realized it today when I looked at the hearing.
Your Honor, you tell me the speedy trial date to run? Or you tell me when the speedy trial will run?
We just got over 10.
Yeah, 90 days from.
Your Honor, Mr. Walton has no objection to waiver of speedy trial. Of course, we may file a speedy trial request at a later date.
I understand. If you would then sign the waiver, please, and have the client sign it.
Your Honor, obviously, given the complexity of the issues as well, if either side wanted to supplement the record, then you would have a week to supplement the record with a memorandum of law. Would that be something that would be okay for Your Honor?
I think it would absolutely be okay. Not only that might be helpful. I think I've got your positions, but I certainly wouldn't mind having both of them in a more formal form. Is a week enough? Mr. Friday, Mr. Galvin, Mr. Andrew?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, by next Friday.
Okay, so Halloween, October 31st,
Yes, Your Honor.
by the end of business?
Yes, sir. That would be fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
So, any memorandums, and obviously I know you, counsel, will copy that for you. So any memos due to be filed by the end of business, October 31st. If you want to copy me on those, that's fine. If you don't want to, what I am going to ask counsel to do, because I've run into issues with this in the past, not too often, but mostly in civil cases, frankly, where counsel files some sort of motion or response, they don't work in my office. I don't check every single case I've got every day. I've got between civil and criminal, I've got over 1,500 cases probably. So if you don't send me a hard copy, if you would alert me that it's been e-filed, then I can just pull it up on the cord and read it. Either way is fine with me. I'm just asking you to alert me to it if you're not going to send me a hard copy.
Your Honor, can you tell us the proper email address to send this to?
Pardon me?
Do you want us to email you a hard copy? Do you want to drop off a hard copy, or do you want us to email you?
Either way is fine.
What should I know for your address?
It wouldn't be mine.
Okay.
And frankly, I probably prefer the hard copy,
Okay.
but if you want to email it,
I'll do the hard copy, Your Honor.
yeah, but I can give you my, in case there's an issue that comes up, my JA's email address is pfields, F-I-E-L-D-S, @coj.net. And that's where anything would go, not directly to me.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor,